For more on this, we can cross to Kyiv and speak with Peter Zalmayev, the director of the Eurasian Democracy Initiative. Peter, thank you so much for joining us on the program today.
Sure. Pleasure to be here.
We've been reporting that Ukraine has targeted Russia's Resign oil factory, as well as sending over 100 drones into Russian territory. But are these attacks actually having any impact?
Well, I mean, these are, of course, targeted strikes as opposed to what Russia is doing to Ukraine, which is what it's doing is bombing our civilian areas pretty indiscriminately. The last one, as you know, resulted in 31 dead in Kyiv alone. Ukraine is doing surgical strikes, obviously, and you're looking at your screens right now. It's a oil processing refinery. Obviously, with this effort, if it were to be scaled up, this would make a significant difference. The question is, though, whether Ukraine has enough capacity now to multiply this effort. So far, it's been kind of here and there and far in between. But the question remains what Donald Trump will do on this yet another deadline that he's set for Russia. And this is supposed to be August 8th. He is demonstrating that his patience is running thin, while enabling Ukraine to multiply, to scale up these sort of attacks that do not result in the death of civilians and yet dent Russia's economy quite significantly. That could be a very effective step if Donald Trump was serious about making Putin pay.
Now, as you mentioned there, Donald Trump has shown that he's losing patience with the Russian president. He just suddenly now said he's got 8 days to come to a ceasefire agreement, or there's going to be, there's going to be those sanctions that Zelensky has been pressing for. But I mean, are we sure this is a hard deadline? Because he also kind of flips and flops, and now he's in a war of words with Dmitry Medvedev, and submarines are being repositioned. How seriously should we be taking all of that?
Well, obviously, Donald Trump, I mean, he flip-flops as he breathes. That's sort of his MO, modus operandi. At the same time, you have to consider the sort of the circumstances that how they've been coming together for Donald Trump. He is besieged by several crises at home, including the Epstein files scandal that just won't go away, and the economy that's apparently slowing down significantly. And so this is yet another opportunity for him to, don't mean to sound cynical, but to deflect and attention from everything else. And he has shown that he's willing to go for some drastic decisions, such as the bombing of Iran, when these things need to be done, and he wants to change the conversation. And last but not least, of course, is Vladimir Putin himself, who has been snubbing Donald Trump for all his peace efforts, for all the visits by his personal envoy Witkoff, and for all the concessions that Donald Trump has forced Ukraine into making. He's got nothing for it. That actually has brought humiliation on his head and some, chattering on the part of his fellow Republicans, who are actually willing to see a more muscular action to punish Vladimir Putin for his intransigence.
Now, those comments from Dmitry Medvedev, where he's saying these ultimatums are a pathway to war. I mean, he's an outspoken critic of the West, but how seriously should we be taking his rhetoric, and how is he viewed in the Kremlin?
Well, it's been said that Dmitry Medvedev is not to be taken seriously. He's sort of like a court jester, a clown, and yet at the same time, he has been allowed to make some very provocative statements through his Telegram channels, through his Twitter, and it's been sort of delegated to him to keep this nuclear blackmail rhetoric going. And this was yet another instance when he pretty much point blank blackmailed, or tried to blackmail, the United States into backing down on Ukraine and threatening a nuclear war, because this message has been actually popular with the MAGA crowd in the United States, and Donald Trump's own sons and Tucker Carlson, who have said that it's not worth going to a nuclear war with Russia over Ukraine. But it seems like this is actually wearing pretty old with that crowd. And Donald Trump himself is very upset with these shenanigans and with Medvedev's rhetoric. This making Trump look weak. And so everyone else is sort of lining up. And it seems like, Dmitry Medvedev may have run the, sort of his course with this. At the same time, Vladimir Putin has obviously used Medvedev for this sort of messaging to keep an arm's length, to keep it at arm's length, to distance himself from all the harder stuff, so to speak, and keep the channels of communication with Donald Trump open. But once again, Donald Trump is not seeing any results for all his peace efforts, and so his patience may indeed be running pretty thin. We'll have to see if this new deadline he's set will finally be a true deadline pretty soon on August 8th.
Now, I want to step back for a minute and talk a little bit about President Zelensky. A couple of days ago, he said that he was ready for a leaders' meeting with the Russian president. But Moscow says that its goals still remain the same from the very beginning. So where are we in this peace process, in peace talks and negotiations? Are we stalled, or is there an opportunity here?
Well, it is quite a sort of a diplomatic dead end when we talk about a meeting between the two presidents. Well, first of all, both sides have sort of considered any sort of one-on-one talks between heads of state as illegitimate. Vladimir Putin considers Zelensky as illegitimate because his term in office has expired, essentially. And Zelensky actually, early in the war, signed the law whereby there are to be no direct negotiations with Vladimir Putin. So kind of both sides have boxed themselves in with this rhetoric. Having said that, Vladimir Putin might actually kind of be able to contemplate a meeting with Zelensky were he to agree to capitulation of Ukraine inside it, sort of like what the Germans were forced to do in May of 1945. Well, Ukraine is nowhere near this point of having to capitulate. At the same time, Vladimir Putin is confident, and that's precisely why this war is continuing, and he's not actually, willing to meet Donald Trump halfway, because he's confident that his time is on his side. He can knock out more of Ukraine's territory, and sooner or later, Ukraine will have to surrender to his terms.
I want to pick up on what you said there about Putin being confident that time is on his side. Russia is definitely taking territory. They just took another city in Donetsk. July, they've seen quite large gains. So what is that doing to morale in Ukraine? And do they realistically think that they can hang in there?
Well, I mean, this has been, the morale has been on the decrease on the Ukrainian side for quite some time, and yet Ukraine is still hanging on. Even with all these territorial gains that Russia has displayed lately, the pace and the sort of the expenditure of life and treasure that Russia is bearing, we're talking about up to 1,000 dead and wounded per day on some days. That's costly. That's costing Russia quite a bit. So I'm not sure that Vladimir Putin will be eventually justified in his thinking. Be that as it may, it is also very difficult for Ukraine. But what does affect Ukraine's morale is actually its allies' Western willingness to be with Ukraine all the way. Something that Western countries, the coalition of Ramstein, including the US, of course, first and foremost, have said time and again, we are with Ukraine for however long it takes. Well, if that holds true, the morale will be there. If we see our allies sort of stepping down, thinking about, some sort of backdoor negotiations with the Russians, losing faith in the ability of Ukraine to continue resisting, well, that will actually be very detrimental to our morale.
I just want to ask one final question here. We've seen the damage that those Russian drones and missiles have been doing across Ukraine, especially Kyiv just the other day. How are people reacting, and what are they doing to keep themselves safe in the capital city?
Well, this is a new normal of life in Ukraine. People know that there's no alternative. If they were to live and if they are to continue to live in an independent, sovereign state, I mean, this is the price they have to bear. We've had countless examples of this sort of resilience before, and obviously the bombing of London that took place over several years and cost tens of thousands of lives, and at the end they prevailed. Ukrainians keep and are actually keeping the faith that in the end truth will prevail, that theirs is sort of the truth in this struggle. As hard as it is, people continue to go about their business, they continue to adapt. And so Vladimir Putin will eventually, I'm confident, lose in his calculation that he can bring Ukrainians to their knees.
Peter, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us. That is Peter Zalmayev, the director of the Eurasian Democracy Initiative.